when you can be part of somebody's desire to try something new or succeed or become happier or achieve something they didn't think they could do before without them knowing about that, that to me is a gift.
You were talking about the Sherpas that work with you. I said, I think one of the things you mentioned is, you started to allude to this sort of the power of the Sherpas and how, it's clearly impacted me. I've kept in touch with these guys, and I'll get another story on the avalanche in a second, but let's spend some time on the Sherpas because they're just incredible people.
There's not a week that goes by that I'm not speaking to some Sherpa somewhere, but of course I stay in touch with Nima because he sort of looks after some of the operational stuff for the foundation in Nepal. But something I don't know if you, the very early days when I started learning about Sherpa people, I always like, where's this word Sherpa from, right? Where's the Sherpa come from? I don't even know this word, right? I've heard of Sherpa, but you never hear it. But a lot of people don't realize Sherpa actually comes from a Tibetan word, which is Sharwa. And Shar in Tibetan is east, and Wa is something from the east. And all the Sherpa came from Eastern Tibet, right? And English people, or Westerners had a problem pronouncing Sharwa that turned into Sherpa, right? And I just love sharing that story with folks, especially those out there who never realized, like, where does that name come from, Sherpa? But something that was incredible and an incredible experience, and you brought it up earlier, John, that when we arrived to base camp with this team, it was one of the most wonderful days of my life. By far up there, for sure. You used to see the smiles, the completion, the laughter, these people have been told no most of their life, most of them, either from birth or from after their injury. No. And now they're on Mount Everest Base Camp at 17,500 plus feet, right? So I called down on the sat phone to my Russian friend. He flies these big Mi-17 helicopters, and I wanted him to bring the helicopter up the next morning very close to base camp because we had to get back down to Kathmandu. This phase of the expedition was over. When I hung up the sat phone, Nima Dower Sherpa jumps into my tent. He's like, Gunnar, I've got this great idea. Hey, before we all get to the helicopter tomorrow, why don't we all go ice climbing in the ice farm, right?
Yeah.
And I remember looking at Nima and I said, Nima, can't we be happy with the success we just achieved? Why do we need to go ice climbing tomorrow? And that's when I knew he got it. Nima came from a village. He was the poorest family in the village. His father died when he was a very young man. He was carrying like 40 kilos of salt from Tibet to the Indian border. And he was known as the dirty boy in the village. And that's when I knew he got it. He said, Gary, look how far we've come. Look how far we've come. I can set up some safety line on this ice wall 100 feet from here. Let's at least give it a shot. Let's give it a try. And I woke everybody up the next morning. He's down at the bottom of the Kumu ice wall. He had set some safety line up on this, 40, 50-foot ice serac wall. And every single member of the expedition finally got over to the bottom of this ice wall and made it up to the very, very top. And if you're wondering, well, how the guys and the girls do it that were in the wheelchair, the guys that had enough strength in their arms just pulled themselves up the face, up the safety line. And the ones that didn't, they just sort of made the movement that they wanted to give it a try. And it was like, this is what I sort of call Sherpa power. And it was like, oh, my Sherpa friends and even other members of the team got around the person and assisted them. It was like top of the world teamwork, and not being corny with that expression, but assisted them in a way that they almost didn't even realize that people were giving them the extra help. And when you become a natural extension to somebody's, I think you said at the very start of the conversation, Jan, that when you can be part of somebody's desire to try something new or succeed or become happier or achieve something they didn't think they could do before without them knowing about that, that to me is a gift.
And that ripple effect has to be absolutely insane. The like you said, I actually was just talking to my little brother last night because I'm working on a book. And me, Gary, you and I may need to talk about co-writing a chapter in this thing because it's going to be called Permission to Dream, 10 Keys to Unlocking Your True Self. And I'm going to pull up this picture that, talking about the smiles and just helping out. This is not the ice fall, but for people to get kind of an idea, we've got lines pulling up, people literally just willing to try to enable that dream to happen.
So in the movie, this is the guy that's climbing up the ice fall. So if you ever have a chance to go watch the movie, this is the scene where this is a scene where he's climbing up the mountain or up the trail, but on the ice fall or on the ice, he's being pulled up by the Sherpas. And it's the look on his face is unbelievable because he is realizing that, like you said, people have told him forever, you can't do this, you can't do this. And all of a sudden he's at 17,000 feet ice climbing in a wheelchair. I mean, think about that. When you're having a bad day.
Living your life in a way, and Gary is just embodying this principle to the utmost degree, right? And living your life in a way where if you can become a positive ripple in another person's life, right? And I'm huge on this. The reason why I'm calling it permission to dream is I'm saying the dreaming takes practice, and it takes a mentor to kind of allow you to show you how high a dream can actually be and still be achievable. I think we're in this weird place in the world where we've set too many high bars when you shouldn't really set a top bar. You just set your low bar, set your minimum standard of excellence, and then don't even worry about how high you can go because you might end up at 17,000 feet. You don't know. And taking that person who has not believed in themselves to 17,000 feet just allows that entire network that person interacts with to now have permission to dream. You're giving people permission to dream. And that is just, John, every single guest that you've brought on here has blown my mind, but as much as this is like a perfect way to start out 2021, perfect way to start out a Monday. I mean, I'm ready to go kill all of these Excel spreadsheets that I need to do today. I am just beyond myself. It's like, Gary, thank you so much for coming.
That was the hope here. Like I said, we all need a little motivation after last year's disruptive year. I've got a picture up on my screen. So as I mentioned earlier, I want to come back to the sort of another story, and I promise there's a segue in that's interesting, I hope, to one of your other works, Sherpas do. So as I mentioned earlier, we trekked up to Montepachuri Base Camp and then up to Annapurna in February of 2004. And then our way back down from Montepachuri Base Camp to Darwin, where we were, I think, either sleeping or having tea or lunch or something, we were coming back down, and as the trail that we had just crossed over not 24 to 36 hours earlier was totally gone and wiped out by an avalanche. And I'm talking about a path of snow that was probably 50 to 100 yards long. And of course, upwards and downwards in the mountain was just nothing but this rock and ice snow. And like I said, if I could figure out how to show, I got a great picture of it, sort of in perspective of our team. But this was back to the Sherpas, this was the only time that I saw Lobsang Sherpa actually visibly worried, right? Nothing fazed him during the whole trip. Not taking us sort of old cranky old men up to the top of base camp down. But he saw this and he all of a sudden got ultra serious and said, because it was the only way we could get, right? We had to go across the path or the trail that was no longer there. So we had to scurry across this 50 to 100 yard avalanche and had no idea if that avalanche had come 5 minutes ago but we certainly knew it had just come within 24 hours. So we scurry across that avalanche, and that really, opened my eyes up to the avalanche experience that you described that actually sort of segues into April 18th, 2014. I was actually in New York City on business, and I woke up that morning. That was the tragic avalanche on the ice fall that killed 16 Sherpas. And as I mentioned earlier, the guys we were with, their day job, if you will, was Everest, not the Annapurna circuit. And so 3 of the Sherpas were up there somewhere at Everest, Base Camp 1. I didn't know. Fortunately, none of them were injured or hurt. Now, I realized after watching Sherpa Stew that there's this very large community of Sherpas in New York. Mm. And obviously, one of them for a while was Dewa Sherpa. And, just thought you'd give a little bit of, I'm curious on sort of the why and the how and, why there. That actually looks just like the one we had, although that.
Yeah, that's the Kumbo ice fall there. And It's very hard to actually picture in your. So if you look at the bottom of that picture, it's going to take you probably 6 to 8 hours to get to about the mid-range. And there could be 1,000 people in that ice fall, right? There could be, let's say, 250 people in that ice fall. You would find it very difficult to pick them out. It's just the scale, as you know, the Himalayas, the scale, and until you see them for the first time, right? The scale of the Himalaya is just what always just takes my breath and my heart away. But yeah, no, thanks for, bringing that. There's thousands and thousands of Sherpa in.
I had no idea until I watched the segment on where they were, in their, I don't know, what do you call it, a temple or their
exactly
place of worship, grieving, if you will, for their community of the people that were, died in the ice fall.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big loss. I mean, it's a huge loss. I mean, because as they all are somewhat connected, and most every Sherpa knows the other Sherpa in some way, maybe not directly, but indirectly, right? But, I mean, it was a very sad time in, I think, history. And I think it just sort of shined, the focus on just how dangerous and difficult when things are going well, they're going super good for everyone. But things, when they turn bad, they can have devastating effects. But, the Sherpa, they have a wonderful way of bouncing back and trying to make even the very worst situations okay with it. We've all lost Sherpas in the mountains or on expeditions before for a variety of reasons. And, it's hard. It's just always hard. But, it takes one trip. Maybe one day, John, we'll head up to Queens and I'll give you an evening with Kipa or with Nima or Lakpa or somebody. And, just bring your big boy pants on because they like to sometimes drink a lot of light beer.
Yeah, I noticed that. I'll fit right in.
But yeah, I mean, they, I feel very fortunate, back in the mid 90s, I got, Kipa Sherpa, his first visa, into the U.S. And since then, his wife now has permanent residence. His daughter is over here. She's married. She's an officer in the Air Force. His other daughter is here finishing university. And, to go and watch them grow up and mature and become, just good human beings in the world. I mean, that was just a blessing. But to go back to Queens and the stories are there. You sit on the floor, share stories. These people I have known for 20 years plus. And it's like, you can hopefully see in my face. It makes me happy. And every time I even FaceTime or WhatsApp or Skype, Nima, or it could be any 100 Sherpa.
Awesome.
But when I get off the phone, you know what I always feel? Freaking better about myself. I feel good. They have a way of making you feel good. And I tell you, if I can pass that energy on once a day somewhere in my life, then, that's okay. And that's something, John, you would attest to. The Sherpa have a wonderful way of, even if you're going slow, you're about to get sick, or you're having a bad day, they can just make you feel that it's okay to have a bad day too sometimes.
Yeah. So this is a picture of the avalanche. So you can get a perspective. There's a couple of my fellow trekkers, and where if you sort of make a path from the people across that avalanche, we've got to get across that thing somehow because the trail is no longer there. So, I mean, this is just, again, back to your point. You just don't realize the size. And like I said, it was the only time, we entrusted Lopsang our lives, right? The whole trip, my wife thought we were out of our minds, right? And she's like, you got to be out of your gourd. You're 55 years old. You're going to Nepal. You're going to go for 2 weeks. I'd never taken a 2-week vacation in my life, right? I mean, it was like, and you're on the other side of the world. There's actually well better communications than I anticipated. But this was an example of us. So I hopefully we can go a little longer because I got a couple more things I want to talk about. And you started alluding on it, and you sort of they make you feel good. And so talk about making you feel good. I want to make sure we talk about your 501c3, your not-for-profit, make others greater. My experience, and we talked a little bit about it, but right, we sort of alluded to the difference between Sherpas and porters and others. I mean, when I was there, our Sherpas were our guides, but our porters were the guys that carried all our gear. And I think we paid those guys $5 a day plus 3 meals. And they were lining down the street in Pokhara to join us. So, I mean, this was a good gig for them. And so my point is that a small amount of money goes an enormous amount a long way to do good in Nepal in particular. And so you started this Make Others Greater charity. And I want to give a shout out. And Jan, I'm hoping we can put a link in the show notes so that if anybody wants to donate, they have an opportunity. But Gary, tell us a little bit about what you're doing, because it's phenomenal from my research.
Yeah, I mean, like, what you said, John, we're a very small nonprofit, probably I think last year, 99.8% or 99%, let's say, of every dollar we received went direct to source, right? The other 2 or 3% is not even hosting fees. Me and my wife take care of that kind of cost, separately and privately, but you have to obviously have some bank fees, et cetera, when you start wiring money or moving money from place to place. We deal in 20s, hundreds, and on occasion, thousands. But, we just sent a shipment to the village in Nepal. It should be arriving here the next few days. That, for $600, I'm buying thousands of Band-Aids, hundreds of compression straps, 4 or 5 sets of crutches, 4 or 5 medical kits placed in certain areas around the villages. So if something was to happen, they could at least administer some basic first aid before getting them to a health post. And that's kind of what we try to do. I mean, Nima now in his village, and I was just in his village a year and a half ago. I mean, at one point he was the poorest, dirtiest Sherpa boy there. And now he has built a school, and we supply that school with supplies and books. And he's basically sort of the mayor of that village, with a huge focus on education and health and safety. And I kind of just said, hey, let's take this to another level, Nima, and maybe see if we can kind of expedite and improve to maybe some other surrounding villages. And that's kind of how the whole idea started. We had always privately supported, my very dear friends and my family, a number of children. But like I said, a little bit of money goes a super long way, and pretty much every last penny we source in country. I can buy probably 100 times more pencils in Kathmandu for the cost, here in the U.S. And that's before you even start shipping things. So, but it's really, really good. It's small. We're happy. We're changing. Our focus is health, safety, and, education, primarily for the younger folks out there in the world. And, it could make me feel better. And the people that get behind me know that somebody's going to have a better day because of it, in a very remote area.
It's awesome. The bottom line is $25, $50, $100. You might as well put a couple of zeros on it here in the United States. It's just incredible how much $25 will do in Nepal, as you said. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that, because it is, to me, it's part of what I do, and the reason the whole Disruptor mantra is sort of to help give back to the community after a long, tenuous, illustrious, I guess, career here. I knew I'd take an hour talking about Nepal, because I could talk for days about it and climbing. But you've also done, as I mentioned earlier, you've done some other really cool stuff, which we maybe have another session on or have a sidebar on. But, you've done these grueling marathons, and you've done, you're an Ironman triathlete. You've obviously shown the world that you can, basically do anything when you put your mind to it. And so, Jan, we didn't get to some of those, but it's all part of your storied story, if you will.
From the very beginning of the episode, right? I'm just a student of the art of the story, right? And the storyline, the archetype, how to paint yourself as the hero and a vision, really bringing that to life and how it affects people via that positive ripple. And so this entire time, it's been beautiful, because the overarching concept is your dream is possible regardless of obstacle, right? So Gary went through these different stages of what he believed his dream was capable of. And then with each accomplishment, we'll say, or with each end of a goal, that dream was able to take a next step up, right? It was able to make it to the next camp, we'll say. It started in an abyss. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize, is that a lot of times your dream manifests itself in an abyss at some point in your life. And the dream is not the automatic rise to the summit, but the blessing of being able to visualize the journey from point A to point B. And so you start to run into these obstacles. People are saying that it's not possible to climb with one arm, or it's not possible to lead this group of people up there. It's impossible to do this. It's impossible to do that. But then you start walking and you just keep going. And it's an accumulation of, well, we accomplished that. And the next thing is, screw it. Let's go to the next level. Let's go to the next level. You know, the Sherpa comes in and you don't even necessarily believe it's possible, but then you get other people that start to believe in your momentum more than you do. And they're unlocking new pieces of yourself that you have permission to access now. And it's this giant group effort, to Gary's point, that starts to motivate each other. And then, John, to your point, you walk up on this path that you're banking on. You're like, okay, my dream is possible. I'm going to head this direction. I know exactly where I need to go. And then you get there and a freaking avalanche covered it up. And you're like, shit. Well, now I don't know if I can make it across. But what I love when you guys started talking about the Sherpa mentality, it's what really punched me in the face, is that this overarching episode is just, you look at that avalanche and the majority of people would say, I need a helicopter to come pull me out, you know, or I quit. I was relying on that path to be there. My dream is now impossible. But the Sherpa is like, all right, time to get serious and skittle our way across, because that's just how you need to get it done. So regardless of whether the path that you thought was there actually exists, or if it's completely destroyed, there's still a pathway to accomplishing what you set out to accomplish, if you choose to see it as an opportunity. And this entire episode is just absolutely phenomenal, because when it comes to allowing people to have the permission to seek greatness in themselves, that is what this all really comes down to for me. So I'm just absolutely mind blown. This is a beautiful episode. This is going to impact a lot of people.
I knew this would be fun. Actually, one sort of point to jump on top of that comment, especially for us, for your apex chasers, right? So chasing the apex makes it sound like you're trying to get to the summit. What I always tell people, in this avalanche story is sort of a good example of that. We had already been to our summit, Montepascuri Base Camp, and then ultimately to Annapurna Base Camp. But once you get to the top, you get to the summit, you're essentially halfway done. You got to figure out how to come back down. And a whole lot of people don't make it down, right? They make it up, and then something happens. I sometimes say it's harder to get down than it is to get up. So when you're chasing that apex or you're trying to get that summit, don't forget, you still got to come back down so you can summit the next time.
Yeah, so that you can give back. It's that little bit up, little bit down. You know, it's never really a true up. I love that. I absolutely love that idea, right? Just a little up, little down. And that's people say falling in love with the process. They say a whole bunch of different ways to try to explain what that feels like. Mm-hmm. But it's generally, what I've really realized is the whole reason why I push myself so hard to go out and seek achievement or to push people or do motivational speaking is not because I want any of it for myself, right? It's because if I go out and I accomplish this, I'm kind of validating myself and giving myself permission to pursue the next goal. But then there's a ton of other people that are watching what we do and say, okay, now I have permission to seek this next goal because this has been accomplished. And it's that, I think, is a big internal motivator for me, is not to chase success so much for personal gain, but to showcase what's possible to people. That's what I love about this entire episode.
Mm-hmm. So right, Gary, any parting thoughts or stories, or again, we'll have a little parting ceremony here in a second, but.
Right. I mean, that was a nice wrap up, from you, Jan, for sure, you know, and it's funny how we're on very similar pages, and you use the phrase, the permission to dream, you know, and I tend to use the phrase, sometimes we have to give ourselves the permission also to dream and also to succeed. Mm-hmm. Right. And, you know, and on that note, you know, I just want to say it's been a real privilege, and thanks for inviting me and starting off my week on this very high note. And hopefully, you know, God willing, it's going to be a good week. And I don't know if we're going to share that last little video just to remind us what is possible, you know, together.
We'll do that. But before we do that, if we were in person, I would have the opportunity to present you with a ceremonial scarf, which is very customary in Nepal when you are leaving. And it's a symbol of thank you and good luck and safety and stuff. So I took the liberty and I sent both of you a scarf. So here's my scarf. So we're going to have a virtual sort of scarf. So what I'm going to do, Gary, is I'm going to pretend to virtually hand you this scarf, and you can put it on, and we'll wrap this show up. So here you go, pal. So you probably give us a little more background on these scarves, but this is actually the one I got in Nepal, and the ones that you have are ones that I bought and I give out to my friends. But it's sort of a way you, like I said, when you start to leave and you get on the airplane or you leave the base camp or whatever, a lot of times you're presented with these ceremonial scarves. So I just wanted to say namaste and Tashi Delka or Deka. Did I say that right?
Almost. Tashi Dele. Tashi Dele.
Tashi Dele.
Yes. I think I was talking to you about this, John, the other day, but sometimes it doesn't matter if it's pronounced correctly or incorrectly, but if you even try to say it and you mean it from your heart, then people hear it from their heart. And, on that note, thank you for the kata. It will be put in a very special place in my house, that I can assure you.
We got another short video sort of to wrap this whole thing up and give you a little extra shot of enthusiasm to go tackle your week. And we got a new month, and hopefully, again, thank you very much, Gary.
A lot of new good content to come out. So we'll show this video, and then we're just going to leave it at that. This episode has taken care of itself. Pay attention to the next time we put some stuff out. If you're not subscribed already, if you're watching this on YouTube, click the little bell for the notifications. Click subscribe so you can see other things. Look for the show notes. That'll be posted later today, along with Gary's podcast episode on the Apex podcast about a week from now. All of the resources to the foundation, the other video clips, and YouTube links will be contained in those show notes. So make sure you pay attention to those if you want to learn more about Gary. And so let's go ahead and send ourselves out.